Hello, good morning, and welcome to the STEAM Cafe. My name is Jillian Rhodes, and I am your host. I'm a dancer choreographer by profession, but on Mondays at this time, at this address in cyberspace, I am here in the STEAM Cafe to offer you a hot steaming plate of science-infused art, talking about all the wonderful ways that science and art fuse and influence each other and make truly beautiful things. On the menu for today, which is very exciting, I'm talking to astrophysicist and musician, Matt Russo. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Yes. So you are a musician and an astrophysicist. The question is, which came first?
Yeah, I can't really pinpoint it. I was really always fascinated by astronomy and music since I was a kid. I mean, I had a passing interest in music and astronomy, and then in my teenage years, both of those took off. You know, I discovered Nirvana and the Beatles, and that took off in one direction, and then I discovered Einstein and relativity, and that took off in the other direction. So I actually kept them kind of parallel, almost conflicting in some ways for many years.
Yeah, conflicting in the sense that, you were maybe trying to like do both as a profession and they weren't quite overlapping.
Exactly. Yeah. I felt this pressure to pick one and focus on that. And I was so passionate about both, I just couldn't make that decision. So I just didn't make the decision. And I just found a way to do both for as long as humanly possible. And then luckily I was able to find a way to combine them so I didn't have to keep
Right.
those
Yeah. No,
going.
that's what I was gonna say. Because at a certain point, you managed to put the two of them together. And so tell me about kind of how that happened.
Yeah. So this was right at the end of my postdoc in astrophysics, where I was really struggling because that's when I really would have had to make a decision of what I do next. And I knew I loved outreach and education, so I was actually doing a lot of public talks at the time, and including talks for grade school students. And so this is around the time that they discovered the TRAPPIST-1 solar system, which was February of 2017. And
Mhm.
so I was preparing a talk on TRAPPIST-1 for a group of 11 or 12-year-olds, and there's these amazing musical rhythms and harmonies in that system. And they're called orbital resonances. And rather than just kind of explain what orbital resonances are, maybe show them some animations, I decided, why don't I just actually convert it to music so that the students can feel it and experience the rhythm and harmony of the system to really understand what's so special about it.
Right. And for anybody who is part of the Art Imaginarium on SETI, which started last year, the first challenge was the TRAPPIST system to make art, basically, and I made a little choreography based on that particular piece of music. But that like led to this whole initiative, which you call System Sounds.
That's right. So once we converted the actual rhythms and harmonies of the planets in TRAPPIST-1 into music, the next logical thing was to look for any other examples of musical rhythms and harmonies in space. So other kinds of orbital resonances, stars resonating, and then we kind of expanded from there and found different ways to convert data that's maybe not in a musical form, but some kind of data into sound so that it can be experienced in a musical form.
Yeah. And did you find that it was easy? Like, did you like, the TRAPPIST system just so happily lends itself to, with the orbital resonances. Did you find that it was easy to find other systems or things that sort of were nice musically, or was it a little bit more difficult?
There are many really good examples. So at first, it was very easy to find other examples of orbital resonances. So they're even closer to home. So Jupiter's moons are a classic example. There's resonances in Saturn's rings. There's all kinds of other resonances within the solar system. It's one of the most interesting things about how planets work together in an orbit.
Mm.
And from there, I mean, oscillations and vibrations are ubiquitous in physics and in nature. And so there's really no shortage of material.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I know that I was watching your TED talk, and apparently the solar system is not particularly nice when you take it as a whole. Like Jupiter's moons might be, but the solar system as a whole is not so nice.
Yeah, so I had to kind of dash people's hopes. I mean, these were like 2,000-year-old hopes in some sense. You know, people like Pythagoras and Kepler who had this music of the spheres idea. And I think I think Kepler, you know, he spent years looking for any kind of musical patterns in the solar system, any kind of way he can look at the data, measure different things to get musical patterns. And he thought he found some, but I think the thing he was looking for really wasn't there in our solar system. So our solar system, uh, it's like eight musicians playing different songs in different rooms, different keys, different times. They're really not playing well together. But
Right.
it's fine for their orbits. They're so far apart from each other, they don't have to harmonize with each other to be in
Right.
nice stable orbits.
They're far enough away that they can just be sawing away at their own little violin, right?
Yeah, in their own
Um,
world.
but it's true though that there has really always been, or throughout history, physicists and astronomers have thought about, and talked about the music of the spheres, for ages and ages and ages. But I think now it's maybe like when you're working with music, do you now these days, kind of what is the balance between, are you doing your own research? I know you're teaching as well. Do you also make music, you know, aside from the system sounds, or kind of what are you up to on a daily basis these days?
Yeah, so I teach physics at the University of Toronto. I've taught the very large first year courses, like with like a
Okay,
thousand people, which is great fun because you're in this gigantic concert hall. It's like performing like every single day for a thousand people.
that's awesome.
But now I've settled into a much smaller course on the physics of everyday life for non-specialists, and I really enjoy that. It gets to like tick my itch or scratch my itch for public education directly over and over again. And that's the level I like to teach at, is kind of popular science level. And so it's really a perfect fit for me.
Yeah. And so alongside that, we were chatting before the show, we went live, and you said you're also doing your own work. Is that more music based or more research based, or both?
Oh, well, my own work is completely in sonification. So when I'm
Okay.
not teaching, I'm almost always working on converting data into music and sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that. So like when when you have a set of data and you're trying to, make it into music, like what's kind of the process of doing that?
Well, the first thing is to identify like, what is the central, most interesting feature about the data or about the system. Like, what do I want people to understand or to feel or to notice directly? Because the
Hmm.
music and the sound is a tool for that. And so that's always where it starts. So sometimes I may look at the data different ways. I may graph it along different axes or find something that where there's a clear pattern that I can communicate through music. And and then I just try to think of the most intuitive way to do that because I want to cut down on the cognitive load of having to understand, this feature of the data maps to volume, this maps to pitch, this like I want to keep that as intuitive as possible so that with the bare minimum explanation and a video, if you're sighted, you can grasp the sonification very quickly and then just experience it. So that's the real challenge, is making the mappings intuitive enough uh, to get a really direct response. Um,
Hmm.
and then in some cases, I have to decide if I want to go for a more musical direction, where I want to go more for an emotional response first, or
Hmm.
if I want to keep it a little more direct and technical and maybe not as pleasing. So there's many choices along the way. It's really half. It's not so much. I wouldn't really call it science. We're not testing hypotheses or anything, but it's half. Uh, very strict data-based representations and half artistic decisions to bring that to life. And
Right.
for people that are unfamiliar with sonification, which is many, many people, you can really think of it as analogous to visualization. That's just something you have more familiarity with. When you take data, you're used to picturing it as a certain type of graph or many types of graphs that you have familiarity with. But the graphs aren't in the data, right? The data doesn't go up or down, side to side. It's just the numbers. And you have to find a representation that makes the patterns obvious. So it's the same thing, but we're doing it through sound.
Right. And I think even, when you're, for example, when you're choosing to make a graph and you choose if it's a bar graph or a line graph or anything, like you make the interpretation based on what you think fits that data set. So it is a creative choice, it's not just like translating like dot, dot, you have to interpret along the way what will bring out the data, in the best way. So I feel like it must be the same with the sonification. It's you're not composing it, but you are composing the final product in some ways.
Yeah, and there's really a wide spectrum. So some sonifications are very direct. Things like the gravitational waves from merging black holes. That's one of the most direct things. You can just take that signal, connect it to a speaker, and you get the sound. It's like no more direct than that. But on the other end, there's examples where I choose a musical scale, I choose a musical representation for the patterns in the data, and that's on the more artistic end. So I like to travel throughout that entire spectrum, depending on what the system is.
Yeah. And do you have a software that you do that? Or is it like, are you playing it as like on a guitar or something? Like how are you actually doing the sonification?
Yeah, so it's all done with coding. So I code in the Python language. So I'm just writing very short Python scripts that bring the data in, do the mapping to music, and export that either as sound waves or as what are called MIDI files, which you can use in another program to trigger instrument sounds. So that's typically how it works. But in some cases, I've performed parts of it on a guitar, or maybe I'll record all the notes on a guitar and use that as a sampler instrument. So the fun part is doing something a little different each time. So there's no strict formula I follow. I try to adjust what I'm doing to the specific data and system.
Okay, so there's one sonification that that you sent that I'd like to take a look at. But so before we hear it, which I hope that's possible, but I'm sure it is. Pamela will have it somewhere.
It's queued.
Before we listen to it, tell us a little bit about it. It's the deep field one, I think, the one that you recommended.
Okay, so some people may have heard of the Hubble Deep Field, which is the deepest optical image ever taken. So you look at a patch of what looks like dark sky with a telescope for many, many days, it's like 20 days or something, and you'll be able to see many, many galaxies in the very early universe. And so the Chandra X-ray telescope did the same thing. So you're getting the deepest ever, furthest ever picture of X-rays. So they're basically X-rays being emitted by supermassive black holes that are actively feeding shortly after the Big Bang, relatively speaking. So it's an amazing image. And the way they represent it is they take the X-ray data they get and they map it into visible light colors for the image. So they take this wide range of X-ray energies or X-ray frequencies. They're not really colors, but it's the same thing, different frequencies of light. And they compress it into this tiny visible band we can see so that you can see it in an image. So the colors range basically across the rainbow from red to violet. And so for this one, I wanted to find a way to convert the color into sound. We've done many other things before. This is one of the first times we tried to map the color into musical pitches. And so what that lets you do is the really low X-ray energies, which you can see as red, are heard as really, really low notes. And then the much, much higher X-ray energies, which are shown as purple or violet in the image, you hear those as very, very high notes. So using sound for this was a way to hear the enormous range of frequencies and energies that are actually in the data that are not really being represented in the image.
Interesting. All right. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look and a listen to this.
They can hear it. You can't. Sorry about that. 40 seconds. Oh, it's in stereo.
I think it's I really like as well. Like I listened to it earlier, but also I really like the little bar that kind of shows the different heights of the pitches as well as it goes up. Like it's like a whole experience. So did you also design the graphics as well?
Yeah, and doing the visuals is an important part of what we do because that's what really helps you kind of connect what you're hearing to what you're seeing. And so, yeah, we think about that. We spend a lot of time thinking about how best to visualize the sound to help make that mapping. It's kind of
Yeah.
also fun to just, look for the peaks and try to hear them, and kind of guess when
Yeah.
they're going to happen.
Right. And do you have so does each and every galaxy have a note, or do you choose like the brightest ones?
It's really just the image data fed through a
Okay.
certain algorithm. So it's not so much a note for every galaxy. It's a note for every pixel of color because each of those, the light from each supermassive black hole in the galaxy, it's got many colors. Sometimes,
So it's like multiple levels of interpretation, actually. Like, the data is interpreted into image, which is interpreted into sound, which is also added with an image on top of it.
yeah, exactly.
So, wow. And then, as far as I know, and that you also designed a planetarium show, which was basically music based, right? So the idea that it's a show, a planetarium show that the seeing impaired could also experience. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I've been running these small planetarium shows at the University of Toronto. I'm one of many people doing that for years. And typically in a planetarium show, you give a tour of the universe. And it's a very common type of show. You start with the night sky above where you are. You zoom out through planets past, outside of our galaxy and as far out as you can go to the edge of the observable universe. And so that's a largely visual experience. And so while I was doing that, someone called the planetarium and said, can you do this? Can you do a show for my mom who's visually impaired? Is there anything you can do to enhance the show? And they were thinking like, make the lights brighter or something like that, or easier to see. But I said, I'm already working on this sonification stuff. Let's do one better. Let's make an entire show that is a audio tour of the universe. So the focus was really on the sounds or communicating the systems we visit through sound and music. And so we went through a variety of things. So you can hear a representation of the stars in the night sky. We did the orbits of TRAPPIST-1, Jupiter's moons, things like that, and kind of a sampling of everything. And I didn't realize it when we first started getting into it, but the response from people who are blind or visually impaired has just been amazing. And that's been the most rewarding thing by far out of any of this. So after word got around about that show, we started having regular social groups of people who are blind or visually impaired come like even over and over again just to experience it. And I got to know them, and it was a lot of fun for me personally.
Yeah, that's really interesting that, we talk about, we need to see the night sky, we need to experience it. And you never, as usual, when you're able-bodied, you don't even think about that aspect of, like we're polluting the night sky with light, but it's at least we have that opportunity to see the stars.
Yeah, and part of it is I like to bring them into the excitement of astronomy news. I mean, if you follow astronomy news, many times it's just a stunning image, right? And there are ways around that. I mean, there's you can do visual descriptions of images, and so I think of sonification of images as another way to do that, to increase accessibility to all the exciting and dramatic imagery we're getting, or data that we show as imagery in astronomy, and letting other people that wouldn't normally have access experience it.
Right. I mean, also when you think about it, like sometimes, the data can be turned into beautiful images, such as with Hubble and all of that. But, so much of the time it's just data and an artist has represented it, like it's like a visual, and most of the time when I see these articles, it's like artist interpretation, of this exoplanet or something. So, I think, I just thinking about what could be, what would be, you could see, I'm sorry, my brain is just going all over the place. There's like an exoplanet where it rains diamonds, right? So like, what if you could hear that, like, what does it sound like for, diamond rain? Like it could be such a different and almost a more immersive experience, because sound is so much more of, what's around us. You can just look at something and it can be beautiful, but the sound is like something that really puts you in the situation.
Yeah, totally. We're isolated from the universe almost except through light, because sound can't travel through the vacuum. So
right.
Most of what we get from the universe is light, and we have to interpret that into ways we can experience with all of our other senses if we want to get a fuller picture of what's really out there and what it would be like to stand on that planet.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you are still, but you had a band, or you have a band at some point.
There was no official breakup, but we're not playing together anymore. But I had a band for about 15 years. And actually, the keyboardist in that band, I played guitar. We halfway through, we started doing music production. So we learned music production software, and we were doing most of that work for the band. And so he's my current partner in system sounds. And so I kind of used all the things I learned about music production with the band, and I'm still using them today in that project. And I'm still friends with the other band members. On good terms.
No, I looked it up on Spotify. I found you do have some songs on Spotify. So it's I don't know how to describe it, like indie rockish. I don't know. It reminded me, for some reason, of this band called Hoobastank. I don't know if that's any relevant, sort of comparison, but that's what I thought of when I was listening to it.
Yeah, I don't know them, but we for the longest time we were kind of we were like a live hip hop band, actually. So it was kind of like the Roots in a way.
Okay.
A poor imitation, if anything, but we were all jazz musicians, and we had a singer, like a kind of a soul R&B singer and a rapper. And then we got signed to a label for a while, and we kind of shifted more into an indie pop thing.
Okay.
It was fun.
Was that kind of part of the crisis of like you were gonna have to pick something, like when go with the further into making albums and doing the band thing, or more into the research?
Yeah, exactly. So when we got signed, I was doing my PhD, and I really wasn't excited about my research at that point. And there's this opportunity with the band that plan was to punch out an album real quick, go on tour, which would mean I have to pause my PhD. And so during that whole time, I kept switching between which world was the most viable option for me.
Right.
But nothing ever seemed right until I combined them.
Well, that's what it was waiting for. No, I noticed some of the songs that I found. I don't know if you had a hand in writing them or not, but they did. They were a bit space themed, a little bit.
That you probably there's a song called "Return to Earth" is maybe what you're thinking.
Yeah, maybe something like
Yes,
that.
yeah. So I wrote the music for that. The singer uh, wrote the lyrics and the vocals, and I had no part in the space references on that one.
Okay. Cool. So I was just thinking that I was looking in the chat here, and people were talking about Ingenuity. Which flew actually. I saw it earlier this afternoon here. You know, do you? I guess it's not particularly musical, but that could be an interesting. You know, I know that there is a Mars. I should know this, but I don't. So I'm just gonna say there is. I think it was Perseverance that was recording the first sounds from Mars, and
Yeah.
so there is kind of this aspect of sounds that's going with it. Is any of that interesting for you? Like, would you be interested in sonifying, you know, some of the data that's coming from Mars?
Yeah, I would be. I mean, the thing is, there's not much to do in some cases because it's already someone's kind of already done that work. So I'm like, I wish I was in on that earlier. Um, but yeah, they've been trying to land an actual audio microphone on Mars for a while. I think the 2 missions that would have done it before happened to crash or didn't make it there. So this is the first one we got, and so we got treated to some lovely kind of wind sounds on Mars and sounds of the rover kind of crawling over some rocks. So that, yeah, to your point about it being immersive, that's kind of what helps you picture what it would be like to be Perseverance rolling around the surface of this foreign world. And there's been a few other examples of that. It's not the first microphone in space. They had one on the Huygens probe that landed on Titan. And so there's also kind of windy ambient sounds from that recording. So I find that stuff very fascinating and interesting. Yeah, I wish there was more for me to do with it.
Yeah, that's I actually didn't know about Titan. I think I read about it, but anyway. So what's next for you? What are you looking forward to in the next couple months?
Well, we started this whole set of image sonifications for Chandra and some for NASA. And so we're doing another set of those. And we're really kind of stepping it up this time. That's the fun part, is finding new things to do, new tools, new ways to bring the data to life. And so I'm really excited about the next batch. We're kind of, it's much more complex than the first 3. And there's another like really, really fascinating project I can't say anything about that's also going to be released by NASA, but there's something that we've been working on for many months that I'm very excited about. So
that's appropriately mysterious, but it sounds awesome. We'll look forward to finding out what that's all about. And so when you're talking about more complexity, do you see it more complexity of the image, or more complexity of the rhythms or the instruments, or kind of all of the above?
In this case, it's more complexity in terms of the types of mappings we're doing and how much, which parameters of music we're able to control. So for the first set, we deliberately wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And so we used very basic sounds, and we tried to make the mapping as easy to understand as possible. So like the height in the image is pitch, and side to side is time. We tried to keep things that basic. But now we're kind of developing and getting a little more abstract. And so we're just kind of exploring other musical tools, other mappings we can, from the image space to the rich world of music that we can harness.
Very cool. So, I mean, I guess my last question would be, have I missed anything? Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about that we haven't gotten a chance to touch on?
Well, the one other thing is kind of like a sonification of the night sky. And it was a musical version, but it communicated the colors and brightness of the stars through music. And a location and a date, and we'll create a video and sonification of the stars on that date, converting their light into music. And so people are finding some real deep meaning, and it's people are using it to memorialize loved ones and commemorate birthdays. And so I get to see all those lovely messages of people connecting and using astronomy and music to do it. So it's kind of nice.
That's amazing. Yeah, there was one artist that I was talking to. I think it was Anna von Mertens, who who was painting this whole series basically about the night sky on these very significant dates in history, in American history, certain things that had happened, and so it was kind of that same idea, that the night sky on a certain date at a certain time is like really speaks to people. It kind of grounds them in context in some ways, that this was happening on Earth, but this is what was looking, this is what this is what the sky looked like. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, astronomy is the original clock, and so when you're talking about deep time, it's kind of like rolling back the sky is literally rolling back the clock to that moment.
Yeah, that's true. Well, great. Listen, this has been lots of fun. It's been really interesting. So I really appreciate, thank you so much for being here.
Really my pleasure. That was a lot of fun.
So to those of you watching in the chat, the next thing that you have to pay attention to is Daily Space, which is going to be on tomorrow at the usual time. No Minecraft Monday today. So there is potentially an astronomy cast, but I'm not sure. So there is an astronomy cast today, and then there's a Daily Space tomorrow and all the other days of the week for all your space news. And I should be back next Monday at the Steam Cafe. I don't know what's on the menu, but I will find out along the way. So a huge thank you to my guest, Matt Russo, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.